Today I'm going to talk about my experience with weed and psychedelics. Now, this is just my experience, so my opinion is based off of my experience only, and slightly off of what I have observed from other people and tendencies that others have. But ultimately, it's my own experience, and if you experience something different, you are completely free to disagree with me. I'm just giving my own experience, because I feel like my experience is more unique than not. So I'll start with psychedelics. The only psychedelic that I have tried is mushrooms, psilocybin, and the way that I came about trying them is that I inoculated and grew them myself in my closet. I bought a grow bag and the syringe and everything, and I did it all myself. I would say that was my favorite part of the whole ordeal is the experience that I had growing them, because growing them was fun. I don't condone anything, obviously, but so I grew them myself. I used a strain that is the most popular and the most tested. So going into this, just know that even though I grew it myself, they were potent. There was no potency issue with these, with what I've tried. In fact, I just did a regular 1 milligram dose, and I had I forgot who I was, so I don't know if it's what people call ego death, but it was very intense, and that was only 1 milligram, which is kind of unheard of, because I remember reaching out and asking other people if that was normal, and they were like, no, not, because I think 1 milligram is what you would take to go to a show or something, like a concert back in the 70s or something. So that was the first dose. It's windy today, and it's also 110% humidity, so it's amazing, even though it's 8 o'clock. It also doesn't get dark until 9. Huh. I got an odd flavor from this, but it must have been the butane. Anyway, so I did 1 milligram, had forgot who I was in a state of paranoia for about, I don't know, an eternity. That's what it felt like. In my experience, it's going in and out of good and bad states of experience. The good experiences were, the good states of being during the whole experience. It was like the typical thing that people talk about, where it's like, I experienced the disassociation with my body, where I would look at my hand and it would be someone else's hand. That's what it would feel like. I was disconnected from my body. And it's kind of like a pain-free, like a nice feeling where you're not in your body. It's like everything's kind of wiped. And you just kind of disassociate with everything. And then, every time I tried psychedelics, I would do my best to get into a good state of mind and be in a good environment. I was by myself in my room. No distractions, no people or anything. Nothing that I needed to do. And I also tried to keep a mentality of not trying to get anything out of it specifically, but obviously the way I am, obviously I want to get something out of it. I want truth. I want to experience all the epiphanies that people talk about. But I did work, because people say that, if you go in with the intention of blah blah blah, then you're gonna have a bad time. I did what I could to open myself and relax myself, and and all that. And the good states were what I said about the body, disassociating with the body, just feeling like, I'm in a great headspace right now, and everything's like green, and my room is green, and everything is great, right? And then at the peaks I would have. And this goes, because I did 1 milligram, and then I went straight into 5 and 10. I think I went straight to 10 milligrams, which is the hero dose, I think, the next time. And I don't remember, this was a while ago, a few years ago. But I honestly remember it being not that different. I think it was longer. It felt more eternal, the suffering and going in and out of states and going to the bathroom. I would go from my room to the bathroom 1 trillion times. But the highs and lows were pretty much the same. And what I got out of it was pretty much the same. And at the peaks, I experienced, epiphanies of and I wrote everything down. And if you've never done these things before, basically, like, when you're under the influence, whatever idea you have, if you're in a good state of mind and it's an epiphany or whatever, you just know that it's like, you're just like, this is like groundbreaking shit that I'm like thinking about right now. And if I remember, it would be like, everything is connected, blah, blah, blah. I would write it all down, and then the next day I would look at everything, and I'm just gonna be honest, like, it's all, I thought it was so profound in the moment, but when I look back at it, it's just stuff that, I don't know, it's just basic stuff. I would say, in my experience, my opinion of these things in general is like, it's just the experience of being under the influence of something that makes you feel good, but also makes you feel really bad. And ultimately, you just have no control. You just have to like it's scary, because it's like you don't have any control over your head or your mind or your emotions. You just have to go with it. And I think the number one thing that I learned from psychedelics and marijuana is that I grew a strong appreciation for sobriety and being able to think clearly, if that makes sense. The ability to have control over my mind and be in the present moment and be grounded in reality. That's what I learned. Because everything else, in my experience and in my opinion, were just like basic ideas that only feel profound because you're under the influence of a drug. So the good states were like maybe 10%, and then the other 90% was just like complete hell, just thinking that I'm like in hell, and everything is like red and purple, and my body hurts. Like, that was I think that was what sucked the most. I just felt sick 90% of the time, and I could feel like my bones, like the ligaments in my, like in between, in my joints and stuff, I could feel them like crack and like rub together, and that was extremely painful. And mentally, I was just completely out of it. Like, I was just, I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what was going on. There were so many like paranoia thought loops and stuff where it's like, I think that I'm like supposed to be like, I'm sorry, there's like a mosquito that keeps going in my ear. Just paranoia about like thinking that like someone's like knocking at my door or something, even though they're not, or that someone's going to knock on my door, like just heightened states of paranoia. And if it wasn't about my surroundings, even though my surroundings were completely normal, I was just paranoid about, like, there's something wrong, and you know, but there was no, like, there was no lesson or clarity or anything about it. It was just like I was just under the influence of this, like, drug that was in my system that was, like, making me insane. That's kind of like, that was my experience, and I did it 3 times, I think. Yeah. And like I said, me personally, what I got out of it is just being so thankful that I'm not schizophrenic, because it basically simulated me being a schizophrenic person that is, like, hearing voices and stuff. Like, I think I did hear voices. And yeah. Overall, not a great experience. Not great experiences, multiple, all of them. And that's about it with the psychedelics. Let me just think if there's anything else. Pretty sure that's it. Because I honestly, like, and I haven't really done them since. I did them another time, like a year or so later, with the same batch that, you know, I put in a Ziploc bag, it was a Ziploc bag with like food grade stuff to keep it not moist. And they definitely, after a year, obviously, they weren't as potent, so it was kind of a half experience. Definitely not as strong, but still, I just felt sick, mentally and physically. I just felt very unwell. And as for marijuana, honestly, very similar experience. The peaks, or the good parts, are similar, where I would have, like, epiphanies or something, and I would write something down, and later I'd be like, well, this is just not very profound at all. Stuff that I already know, and I'm not trying, obviously, like, if you're watching this and you hear my words and you think that you take me as a person that thinks very highly of themselves, or I'm very smart or something, you can think that, but honestly, I'm just being honest. It's like the things that I was having epiphanies about, it's like stuff, it's very basic stuff, but because I was under the influence of a drug, they felt and seemed so, like, profound, like a new idea or something. Good Lord, I'm sorry, like, the situation is kind of crazy right now out here. Weed, I just can't. I just sit and do nothing, and I feel very anxious because I can't even like think properly. It's like I'm there, but I'm not there. I can't properly assess my surroundings. It's just not for me. I guess if you're like if you're the type of person that wants to escape their surroundings, I totally understand why these things are appealing, but for me, it's just, in my honest opinion, I just wasted like an entire evening or something, or whatever time. And honestly, as soon as it comes on, I'm just waiting for it to come off so I can go back to being normal. And that's why I don't do anything. I just have my nicotine and caffeine, and that's it. You know, I'm that type of person. I like stimulants and things that make me more grounded in reality. And obviously, I sound like I'm very negative about other people's, when other people have good experiences and I come on here and being very negative about it. That's just my experience. I'm not trying to say that they're inherently bad, but in my experience, it just doesn't work for me. And I think there are other people that have probably had similar experiences. I just like being awake, if that makes sense. So I feel like, I guess this video is, it's either for people who have never tried anything and they're just curious to hear a negative experience, or if you've tried these things, this is just my personal experience. And maybe if you're open to hearing a different perspective, that's my perspective. Yeah. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else that I can say. But I feel like that kind of wraps it up, or that sums it up. Obviously, this isn't the best video I've done, but, with this whole content thing, it's natural that I'm gonna have these types of videos that are just a little bit more low key, I guess. I just think that if you have things to face about yourself, about your situation, about your mind, in my personal opinion, I just prefer to face things head on. And yeah, like, if that means that I don't get a unique perspective that I might have gotten if I was under the influence of something, I don't really mind. In a way, I feel more satisfied that I was able to come to terms with something or to realize something on my own. If that makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for watching.